Tonight, President Buhari, alongside over 100 world leaders, attend the opening ceremony of the United Nations General Assembly in New York as U.S. President Joe Biden urges unity among nations. The President seeks amendment to the Petroleum Industry Act for an adjustment and the provision for better geographic representation on the boards. The contentious dispute between Imo and Rivers State to be determined by the Supreme Court in November. Suit seeks to stop the federal government from ceding 17 oil wells in Rivers State to Imo State. And hundreds more evacuated from La Palma in the Canary Islands as lava from an erupting volcano nears the Atlantic Ocean. Plus, international news from our London studio. The stage is now set for world leaders to articulate their views at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. United States. The Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, who is expected to address the Assembly on Friday, is among 100 world leaders who attended the opening ceremony today. U.S. President Joe Biden, who took the first shot, called for unity among leaders as he urged them to come up with new strategies that will reverse the global economic recession caused by the devastating effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our State House correspondent, Gloria Muzoke, reports.
A movement is highly restricted on the streets of Manhattan on the first day of the general debate. Security is further intensified as several roads have been cordoned off from several blocks away. Inside the UN Assembly Hall, nearly 100 heads of state or government are physically present for the opening session of the United Nations General Debate, including Nigeria's President, Muhammadu Buhari, who is flanked by the Foreign Affairs Minister and Nigeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, among others. Addressing world leaders, President Joe Biden amplifies the need for collective action against the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, inequality, terrorism, as well as human rights abuse.
And as we strive to make lives better, we must work with renewed purpose to end the conflicts that are driving so much pain and hurt around the world. We must redouble our diplomacy and commit to political negotiations, not violence, as a tool of first resort, to manage tensions around the world, must seek a future of greater peace and security for all people of the Middle East.
In spite of nearly $15 billion by the U.S. towards global response of the pandemic, distribution inequity remains a key challenge. To bridge the gap in Africa, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who met separately with Nigeria's president, seeks vaccine manufacturing on the continent.
At the WTO, what we're doing is actually working directly with the manufacturers. We're helping them monitor their supply chains, which are very complicated, to see what are the bottlenecks they have, what are the regulatory issues they face, how can we facilitate trade. Because moving supplies from one place to the other for the manufacturers trade, how can we facilitate this for them? In return, we're asking them to deconcentrate production and go to those parts of the world where they have and invest.
The speeches from the first day of the general debate certainly sets the tone for greater commitment by member nations amidst what the U.S. president describes as a decisive decade of the world. From New York, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Back home, President Muhammadu Buhari has appointed new members into the board of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC. In a letter to the Senate, which was read by the President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, the President appointed Mr. George Abang as Secretary of the board. Others include Mr. Lukman Mohammed, Mr. Kola Adishino, and Mr. Mohammed Yahya. The appointments are subject to the ratification of the Senate and are in accordance with the Act establishing the Anti-Graft Agency. Meanwhile, the President has written to the National Assembly to seek amendments to the Petroleum Industry Act. President Buhari is asking for an amendment to the administrative structure of both the Commission and authority to provide for better geographic representation on the boards. Our National Assembly correspondent Terry Kumi reports that the President's letter was read in both chambers of the National Assembly.
About a month after President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Petroleum Industry Bill into law, the National Assembly has received a communication from him for an amendment. President Buhari is asking Parliament to expand the composition of the board to promote national unity.
If this amendment is approved, it will now increase the number of non-executive members from 2 to 6, that is, 1 person from each of the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. The proposed amendment will increase the membership of the board from 9 to 13 members, that is representing 44% expansion of the board size. This composition will strengthen the institutions and guarantee national spread and also achieve the expected policy contributions.
The President is also asking that the portions of the Act which make provision for the Ministries of Finance and Petroleum to be appointed into the board of the Commission be deleted, stating that both ministries already possess constitutional responsibilities of either supervision or intergovernmental affairs. In the meantime, a senator from Enugu State wants the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation Committee to accord Enugu State the status of an oil-producing state.
The Revenue and Fiscal Mobilization Commission have gone a step further to recognize Kogi. They have recognized Anambra. What is left is Enugu State. Because from their letter they have written here about the Department of Petroleum Resources, the oil blocks, the OPL 915 and 916, they are in our area.
Thank you, honorable colleagues.
Meanwhile, lawmakers in the House of Representatives want the Nigeria Police to be excluded from the contributory pension scheme.
The armed forces, the DSS, the intelligence agencies are not part of the contributory pension act. When the Nigerian Police was brought under this act, the aim was to ensure that they get enhanced welfare, both while they are serving and at retirement. But Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, this has not been the case.
What I saw yesterday in Kaduna on television, police officer that served 35 years. When you're looking rated, Mr. Speaker, looking rated.
I have it.
The bill scales second reading as lawmakers insist that if passed, it will serve as a positive motivation for better service delivery.
I have it.
Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Away from the National Assembly, the nation's courts have been busy, beginning with the Supreme Court, which has set November 1st to begin definite hearing on applications in the suit seeking to stop the federal government from ceding 17 oil wells in Rivers State to Imo State. The Apex Court had earlier granted an interim injunction against the federal government, pending the determination of the suit brought before it by the Rivers State government. At the resumed hearing, a 7-man panel of justices, led by Justice Kekeriekun, granted a motion filed by the Attorney General of the Federation for leave to regularize the court papers filed.
The Supreme Court welcomes parties in the battle for the ownership of 17 oil wells, which the Rivers State government is alleging that the federal government wants to cede to Imo State. The Attorney General of the Federation had filed an application challenging the jurisdiction of the court to hear the suit. Counsel to the AGF argues that the suit of the River State government is instituted against actions of some federal government agencies and not the federal government itself. And as such, the Federal High Court is the best place to hear the suit.
It relates to the administrative maps of Nigeria. River State is complaining about some errors. As you can see today, all the processes filed have been regularized and the matter has been adjourned. We hold the view that the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, original jurisdiction, is not in relation to complaints about actions, decisions, or activities of agencies of the federal government. They hold a contrary view. We are sure that by the time we come back on the return date, the Supreme Court will do justice to that issue.
The legal team for the River State government is asking the court to give them 7 days to file his reply on points of law to the motions.
They had filed a notice of preliminary objection challenging the jurisdiction of the court
And on the part of the second defendant, they had also filed their statement of defense, which was regularized this afternoon. And having done that, the court also gave us, that's the plaintiff, time to reply on point of law to some of the issues that have been raised in the application.
The panel of justices led by Justice Kekere Ekun adjourned till November 1 to hear all applications, also ordering counsels on the case to conclude filing and serving of court papers. Rivers State had taken the Attorney General of the Federation and the Imo State government before the Supreme Court, seeking a declaration that the boundary between Rivers and Imo States, as delineated on Nigeria's administrative map and other maps bearing similar delineations, are inaccurate and do not represent the legitimate boundaries between both states.
Meanwhile, the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Abdurrashid Bawa, was at the Lagos High Court in Ikeja today for the trial of an oil marketer, Abubakar Ali Peters, of an alleged 761 million naira fuel subsidy fraud. Bawa is the star witness in the case of Abubakar, who is being tried by the EFCC along his company, Nadabo Energy Limited, before Justice Sedoten Ogunsoya. But the proceedings could not go on today owing to the absence of the defense counsel. The EFCC prosecutor, Seydou Ater, told the court that the matter, which commenced in 2015, has suffered many adjournments owing to the absence of the defense. Ater also said the prosecution's star witness was in court and that he was ready to proceed with trial. The defendant, Abubakar, who was present in court, told the judge that his counsel was to fly into Lagos from Kaduna, but he could not tell why he was not in court. He said he called his counsel just before the court sat, but his phone was switched off. Justice Ogunsoya has adjourned the matter until tomorrow, Wednesday, September 22nd, for continuation of trial. Staying with the court hearing in the suit filed by Aloy Ejimako, who is special counsel to the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, in a case against the federal government and others in Umuahia High Court, has been adjourned to October 7th, 2021. Presiding Justice K.C. Okereke disclosed that he would transfer the case to the Chief Judge of the state for reassignment because his one-month-long vacation for scrutiny of the matter would expire on September 30. Some of the respondents in the appearance are the DSS from Abuja and Abia State, while others, including the federal government, the Attorney General of the Federation, amongst others, were conspicuously absent. That notwithstanding, the special counsel to Nnamdi Kanu was optimistic that justice will be served. In part two after the break, federal government says it will prosecute vaccination card racketeers in the country and lists the support of the DSS and anti-graft agencies to track offenders. Stay with us. Welcome back. If it has joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. United Nations General Assembly kicks off in New York. U.S. President Joe Biden urges unity among nations. President Buhari seeks amendment to the Petroleum Industry Act over geographic representation on the boards. Supreme Court to determine oil well dispute between Imo and Rivers State. And hundreds more evacuated from La Palma, the Canary Islands, as lava from an erupting volcano nears the Atlantic Ocean. Governor Dave Umahi of Ebonyi State has once again called for the establishment of the proposed Southeast Development Commission. He made the submission at the inauguration of the new executives of the Southeast Traditional Rulers Council at the Ecumenical Center in Abakaliki, the state capital. The governor noted that the traditional institution has a major role to play in the development of the region, as well as the enthronement of peace in Igbo land.
When we shout restructuring as Ndibo, we should rather be talking about having Southeast Economic Commission to develop our abilities, to develop our comparative advantages. We've not had our own share of the national cake. We should have that. It went through the immediate past National Assembly. We should rent our voices to say, let us bring it back. So that when we find what Enugu is good at, Abia is good at, Anambra is good at, Imo is good at, Ebonyi is good at, you say Ebonyi has Ebonyi rice. Oh, we can develop agriculture with who and the cutlasses. Who has ever developed? But we've been doing that, selling our lives, shortening our lives to feed the nation. But it's time to do mechanized agriculture, and we need money from federal governments to do this. So when we push restructuring, I call for administrative restructuring, where power, is ceded more to the states. But economic restructuring, we should develop the comparative advantage of each state. And at that time, we can now say yes, every state can compete.
Let's bring in Terry Kumi now in Abuja for more on the news at 10. Hi, Terry.
Well, hello, Amarachi. Those involved in COVID-19 vaccination card racketeering around the country may be in for a rough time, as the federal government says it is enlisting the support of the Department of State Services, DSS, and the anti-graft agencies to track them down. The Executive Director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shuaib, stated this at the bi-weekly briefing on COVID-19 in Abuja. He also clarifies that Nigeria is not among countries on the United Kingdom's COVID-19 red alert lists, following their recently modified guidelines for inbound passengers.
The Executive Director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency gives an update on the ongoing COVID-19 vaccination. He notes that more than 4.4 million people have been vaccinated, 1.7 million of whom have gotten their full vaccination against the virus. He warns against COVID-19 vaccine racketeering, warning that the government will prosecute culprits.
The DSS and the ICPC are involved. Once these individuals who are involved in this vaccination racketeering are charged to court, those individuals who are also promoting or trying to access cards illegally will also be prosecuted. So it's a question of those who want to sell and those who want to buy will jointly be prosecuted.
The government also makes clarifications on the recent United Kingdom's vaccination guidelines for inbound passengers.
We have had preliminary discussions with officials of the UK government. Without prejudice to the information yet to be released, we have been assured that Nigeria will maintain the status quo. That is to say, Nigeria will not be on the red list.
Meanwhile, the country director of the World Health Organization appeals to international communities to desist from discriminating against travelers who have been fully vaccinated with any COVID-19 vaccines approved by the World Health Organization.
Proof of vaccination shouldn't be a prerequisite for travel and may only deepen inequities. If someone is fully vaccinated with any of the vaccine with WHO emergency use listing, they should be treated in the same way, regardless of which vaccine they've received.
Many countries around the world have begun administering strict COVID-19 vaccination guidelines for travelers, with some of the countries in Europe and America insisting on full vaccination before entry.
Meanwhile, at least 20% of the full-time workforce in Nigeria lost their jobs as the COVID-19 pandemic took its toll on the nation in 2020. This is according to a new report jointly released by the United Nations Development Programme and the National Bureau of Statistics. Speaking at the launch of the report in Abuja, the country director of the United Nations Development Programme, Mr. Mohamed Yahya, explains that the report is expected to help policymakers in ensuring economic recovery post-COVID-19.
This is the first effort to aggregate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on businesses in the country. The survey, which is jointly conducted by the National Bureau of Statistics and the United Nations Development Programme, makes some profound discoveries.
A synopsis of the report is indicative of the fact that COVID-19 impacted negatively on business enterprises across the country in terms of revenue generation. The results, of course, also show that about 81% of enterprises interviewed experienced a decline in revenue generation, while about 73% stated that they faced liquidity challenges due to the secondary impact of COVID-19 in the year 2020. So the median loss in revenue reported remained at 44% in comparison to what we had in 2019.
3,000 businesses across the country were involved in the survey. One of the key findings of the survey is the decline in revenue and liquidity, which the report states is necessitated by factors such as restriction in movement, increase in transportation costs and raw materials, and reduced hours of operations.
We have seen that 61% of businesses operating at the time of the survey had temporarily closed down during the pandemic, and a third of informal enterprises continue to operate throughout the pandemic.
The general findings of the survey shows potential of recovery and the need for increased investment in bridging the digital divide among various communities and businesses. It also provides an opportunity for the government to implement policies to assist in economic recovery.
These adverse implications on Nigeria's vulnerable population in a complex development setting calls for concerted action to simultaneously mitigate both the health and the socioeconomic implication immediately.
The survey is then launched. Now that the survey has been launched, it is expected that it will provide insights to policymakers on how to create plans that will address the needs identified.
Away from the COVID-19 issues to human development, which dominated discussions of the National Economic Council's Human Capital Development Communication Strategy Validation meeting today in Abuja. Governor Nasir El-Rufai of Kaduna State is blaming lack of political will for Nigeria's low human capital development. Our State House correspondent Kayla Megwa reports.
Since 2018, the Human Capital Development Core Working Group of the National Economic Council has been working with states and local governments to see that citizen capacity is improved to meet the 2030 goal of having healthy, educated and productive Nigerians.
In Hong Kong, in Japan, in Singapore, in Canada, a child born today, if you give health, education, skills, capabilities, would achieve 80% of their potential. Nigeria, our great country, which is why we're here. What did we score? 36%.
While commending the federal government's efforts, the World Bank representative wants the government to do more.
Nigeria has a long way to go, but it's really heartening to know that Nigeria has taken this very seriously and is one of the few countries that has developed this core working group that brings the government and multiple of our ministries and development partners and civil society together really to address this challenge.
The governor of Kaduna State admits that the failure to boost Nigeria's human capital, especially in northwestern states like his, is the absence of political will on the part of the nation's leaders.
Politicians have a 4-year election cycle, but education is a generational investment. So is healthcare. It takes 30 years for the results of investment in education to show. And unless our political leaders realize the imperative of taking very difficult decisions for today so that generations will benefit, we will not make any progress.
If a child born in Nigeria can only attain 36% of his potential and has to compete with a child born in Hong Kong who has the capacity to achieve over 80% of his potential, then what are the chances for the Nigerian child? The Kaduna State governor has summed up the problem as political will, balancing out immediate results with long-term results. The call is for that political will to exist and be nurtured. That way, Nigeria's human capital development will translate in national development. From the State House in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
When the news at 10 returns, political economist Professor Pat Otomi asks governors to stop chasing value-added tax and focus on production. Plus, top Nollywood actors picket Radisson Blu Hotel in Ikeja over royalty dispute. Join us again. Welcome back to the news at 10. A professor of political economy, Professor Pat Otomi, is challenging state governors to channel their energy towards production and stop chasing after revenues that will make their state poorer. Reacting to the debate over the collection of value-added tax, the former presidential candidate says there is an urgent need to develop a clear-cut vision for the country. Speaking at the meeting of the Rescue Nigeria project in Abuja, Professor Otomi explains that states can only be richer if they focus on manufacturing.
Central to the problems of Nigeria is a failure to understand the difference between production and revenues and what they mean for the quality of life that people live. We are obsessed with revenues, and that's why we are fighting each other, starting wars, all kinds of things over sharing, structure, restructure. And when I hear these conversations, I'm struck about the power of ignorance. Ignorance is a very powerful thing. People are rushing to get what will make them poor. Go through history. No nation, no group of people became rich through revenues. You become rich through production. Doesn't matter how much money you get, whether they are donating it, whether it is coming from oil or coming from diamond, coming from anything, you will be poor. So what shall we do to change the mindset of a politician to be production focused rather than revenue focused? Because revenues are killing us. We're all struggling to gain more revenues. How can we do? What can we manipulate? Is it a petroleum act or bill or whatever it is? Is it that? Is that? And yet we're just rushing for what will make us poor. So let us see if political parties can develop a mindset that can get us away from where we are.
And that's all from the nation's capital. Let's go back to Lagos now with Amarachi.
Thanks a lot, Terry. And back here in Lagos, we continue with some company news. Shell-funded impact investment company Alon has signed a $2 billion investment with a fintech company, Infi Branches Technologies Limited, to help bridge the energy distribution gap in underserved rural and semi-urban areas of Nigeria. At the signing ceremony in Lagos, the CEO of Infi Branches, Olushola Owoyemi, said the potential of this deal will close the gap by connecting consumers and renewable energy service providers seamlessly. Alon, an independent impact investing company, was seeded with funding from Shell and works with partners to increase access to commercial energy products and services for unserved and underserved off-grid energy markets in Nigeria, with special focus on the Niger Delta.
If you look at the numbers by the World Bank as regarding Nigeria's electricity status, they are not in the green zone. 85 million Nigerians don't have access to grid electricity, representing 43% of the country's population. Those numbers also represent opportunities, depending on what side of the half glass you see. Some entities have got their eyes already on providing an off-grid solution, clean and alternative energy.
It's been led by Olon.
Two companies, Olon and Infi Branches, an investor in renewable energy space, and the other, a fintech company, are partnering to solve distribution and payment challenges of off-grid energy provision and accessibility. It's a $2 million investment deal.
We have a slogan, we say power in your hands, and we also allow them to transact anywhere. So with power in your hands simply means with a mobile phone, they can actually collect payments on behalf of different renewable energy provider, mini grids, solar home system providers, wherever they are. And we're also solving the distribution problem so that we try to shorten the time it takes for renewable energy companies to distribute their products from their warehouses to the final consumer, which is the last mile consumer. So that's basically the problem we're trying to solve, and we're using technology and people to do that.
Allon is a fund that was set up by Shell to invest in off-grid clean energy companies in Nigeria. But one of the key issues that all of our investee companies have, one of them is distribution. How do you get your products across Nigeria? It's a very big country, very complicated country. And secondly, how do people pay? How do you make payments easy? So what Infi Branches has done is they've actually now solved both of those problems. So that now solar companies coming into Nigeria or growing in Nigeria, instead of having to set up their own distribution and their own payment platform, they can actually leverage what Infi Branches has put in place.
The money will help Infi Branches deepen energy access, grow customer base, inventory automation, increase their agent base, which is at 9,000 right now, make payments real time, create more channels, and make transactions available anywhere. Poverty reduction and clean energy access are closely linked. A fintech intervention in the renewable energy space is a point-blank intervention that brings significant solution. That's what Olon and Infi Branches say they are helping to bring through their partnership.
From Olon's a new partnership, two Nollywood top actors, including Jide Kosoko, Fred Amata, Yemi Sholade, Emeka Osai, and many more, who joined other filmmakers to picket Radisson Blu Hotel in Ikeja. The creators, led by the Copyright Management Organization, Audiovisuals Rights Society, disrupted normal services at the hotel for what they describe as the management's refusal to pay royalties for its use of audiovisual content in its chain of hotels. According to movie producer and chairman of Copyright Management Organization, Mahmoud Ali Balogun, picketing the hotel became a last resort after months of dialogue, and negotiations broke down without any agreement reached. Management of the hotel declined to make comment on the incident.
I think we've exhausted the level of diplomacy. We've had meetings with their lawyers. We've invited them. They've been invited by the police because we petitioned the IG as per hotels not heeding our requests for them to pay their license for their licenses. We petitioned the IG granted a petition with Zone 2, and they've been invited. These people were invited, their lawyer went and represented them and then came to discuss with us. We've been going back and forth, and it's like they are taking us for granted. The lawyer went on to say that, look, if we go to court, it will spend 20 years there, right? It's been playing tricks with me. A hotel that charges 90,000 naira a night per room is refusing to pay 90 naira a night per room for our licenses, right? Other hotels, few of the hotels have complied, but it's like, oh, they know how to have their way. Our people are impoverished, right? Our people are dying daily. Our people are not having enough to feed themselves and their families. If anything happens to any of us, right, only very few of us can take care of ourselves. Majority of our people, we go cap in hand begging. You are all aware, once any one of us falls ill or dies, we start running helter-skelter, trying to put money together so that we can give the person better treatment or give the person a befitting burial. This shouldn't be happening. People are owing us billions of naira in form of royalties.
Time now for business news. Here's Teniola Shobowale.
Thanks a lot, Amarachi. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, has been speaking on recent steps taken by the government to improve its revenue base. Some of the steps, according to him, includes the review of domestic laws to ensure collections through digital platforms. Speaking during the 17th Annual General Assembly meeting of the West Africa Taxation Forum in Abuja, the SGF explains that the plan will, in the long run, shore up the nation's revenue base, which has suffered some setbacks owing to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The traditional brick-and-mortar business is now very much up against an entirely different business model. Suffice to say that while this presents great economic and business opportunities, on the one hand, it also presents a challenge on the other, as governments must find a way around what is still very much an emerging area of tax administration. In this regard, Nigeria is putting in place measures to ensure that we keep up to date with these developments and answer the question of what to collect and how to collect it as far as the digital economy is concerned. Therefore, our definition of what to collect, whether we call it income tax, digital service tax, or value-added tax, must address the issue of redefining who a taxable person or entity is to accommodate the fact that digital transactions sidetrack the ordinary and traditional understanding of jurisdictions. In addressing this question, Nigeria is constantly reviewing its domestic laws to identify changes required to bring the digital economy to taxation in country.
2.345 trillion naira, that's the amount that the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation says it generated as revenue from the sales of petroleum products in the last 1 year. According to the May 2021 edition of its monthly financial and operations report, the state-owned oil company says the amount was largely contributed by Premium Motor Spirit, commonly known as petrol, which accounted for 99.69% of the total volume. Similarly, the report says the corporation exported crude oil and gas worth $1.64 billion between May 2020 to 2021. The NNPC mentions that period-to-date production from joint ventures, production sharing contracts, and Nigerian Petroleum Development Company contributed about 60.94%, 20.04%, and 18.99% each. Meanwhile, the federal government plans to end electricity subsidy amounting up to 30 billion naira and all other financial interventions within the market with effect from January next year. The special advisor to the President on Infrastructure, Ahmed Zakari, made this known to journalists at a stakeholders meeting organized by the Nigerian Electricity Commission. He explained that the move will allow the country's electricity market to run on its own while leaving prices to be determined by demand and supply as well as market participants. A bill to amend the Pension Reform Act 2014, which aims to exclude the police from the contributory pension scheme, has passed second reading at the House of Representatives. The bill, which was passed and referred to the relevant committee of the House, seeks to amend Section 5, Subsection 1 of the Pension Reform Act, which will include the Nigerian Police Force as part of the categories of persons exempted from the contributory pension scheme, which presently include members of the armed forces, the intelligence and secret services of the Federation. More than 16 billion naira is lost to another round of sell-off on banking stocks at the equities market, as total volume of shares traded today drops by 3.4%. Laddie Williams has the details.
And it's the second trading day of the week, and the bear maintains its grip on the markets. And this move wiped out about 17 billion naira from the market cap. Let's look at the activity chart. Volume is down by 3.41% compared to yesterday. We see values also down, which closed at 2.34 billion naira. Meanwhile, we had more deals today at 3,809. Over to the gainers counter, we have MRS, Veritas Capital, and Regal Alliance leading that counter, while Nemeth led the losers counter. Share price lost almost 8% to close at 1 naira 75 kobo. And banking stocks were the most traded by volume, with UBA, GTCO, and Zenith Bank topping that counter. The sectoral performance now, we see the banking index is down 0.97%. We could attribute today's bearish move to sell-offs in some banking stocks. All right, so we've had 2 negative sessions. Let's see how the remaining 3 play out. And that's a stock market report. I'm Ladi Williams. Back to you.
Business news tonight. It's back to Amarachi for the rest of the news at 10.
Thanks a lot, Tenyola. Beyond our shores now, authorities in the Spanish Canary Islands have been forced to evacuate another village in the path of lava gushing from a volcano towards the sea. Evacuation of El Paso was ordered after lava started spewing from a new crack in the Cumbre Vieja volcano. Simon Pusey has more and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Sudan says that people linked to the ousted President Omar al-Bashir were behind Tuesday's failed coup attempt. A spokesman blamed forces of darkness, adding that those involved had been arrested. Bashir, who had been in power for 3 decades, was toppled 2 years ago. Reports from the capital Khartoum and nearby Omdurman say there has been intense military activity and the main bridge across the River Nile has been closed. The plotters are thought to have tried to take over the state media building. The European Court of Human Rights has found that Russia was responsible for the killing of Alexander Litvinenko in 2006. The former Russian spy, who became a British citizen, died of polonium poisoning in London. A UK public inquiry conducted in 2016 concluded that the killing was probably approved by Vladimir Putin. Russia has always denied any involvement. The UK inquiry said former KGB bodyguard Andrei Lugovi and Dmitry Kovtun put the radioactive substance into his drink. Meanwhile, a third Russian faces charges over his alleged involvement in the Salisbury poisonings, which killed 1 person and left 3 critically ill in 2018. Security sources believe Denis Sergeyev was the on-the-ground commander in the Novichok attack on the former double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party has narrowly won Canada's election, but it failed to secure a majority. This is Mr. Trudeau's 3rd federal election win, but his critics say the poll was a waste of time. The Liberals are projected to win 156 seats, short of the 170 seats needed for the majority Mr. Trudeau was seeking with his early election call. The Conservatives have held on to their main opposition status and are expected to win about 122 seats. Police and FBI agents investigating the disappearance of Gabby Petito have searched the Florida home of her fiancé's parents 1 day after finding a body that matched her description. The search marked the latest turn in a story that has captivated Americans and made international headlines. Officers could be seen loading cardboard boxes into the back of a police van. Police have called on Laundrie, who returned to Florida from the road trip on September the 1st without Petito, as a person of interest in the case. South Africa's former president Jacob Zuma has failed to appear at the High Court for the resumption of his corruption trial. His lawyer has told the judge that Mr. Zuma could not attend for medical reasons. He is facing 16 counts of fraud and racketeering related to an arms deal in the 1990s.
Mr. Zuma, could I ask you to stand, please?
Mr. Zuma denies the charges, insisting they are politically motivated.
Am I correct?
The Russian city of Perm has mourned the 6 people killed by a teenage gunman at a university in an incident that sent shockwaves through the community. The gunman, identified by local media as an 18-year-old student, opened fire on a campus at Perm State University, prompting students to barricade themselves inside classrooms and to jump from first-floor windows to flee. Dozens of people gathered outside the campus to pay their respects to those who had died. An erupting volcano on La Palma in the Spanish Canary Islands has forced authorities to evacuate another village in the path of lava gushing towards the sea. The evacuation of El Paso was ordered after aerial footage showed lava flowing towards the Atlantic Ocean. Other drone footage shows lava pouring into swimming pools, causing huge plumes of steam. The flow has been destroying everything in its path since the eruption 3 days ago. More than 6,000 people have fled from the area since Sunday. And finally, China's Mid-Autumn Festival celebrations have kicked off in style. The Mid-Autumn Festival is the 15th day of August on the lunar Chinese calendar. People typically hold family gatherings, eat mooncakes and admire the moon and celebrate good harvests. This year, the famous televised gala had a global audience as the event was simultaneously broadcast overseas for the first time ever. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel studios in Lagos.
Ayotunde Balogun standing by with sports news.
Yes, indeed. Many thanks, Amarachi. Excited players of the Super Falcons class of 1999 have hailed the recognition and honor received at the 3rd edition of the NFF ITEO Awards, 2 years after the Super Eagles class of 1994 received similar recognition. And the 1999 Super Falcons squad, against all expectations, reached the quarterfinals of the FIFA Women's World Cup, losing to Brazil 4-3 in what was the very first time a women's competitive game was decided by the golden goal rule.
Members of that team went on to create history and set records at various levels.
Bayana of South Africa beat reigning African champions, the Super Falcons of Nigeria, 4-2 in the final fixture of the Aisha Buhari Six Nation Invitational played this evening at the Mobolaji Johnson Arena in Lagos. It was the second win for the South African team in the tournament after thrashing Ghana 3-0 in their first game. An own goal from Falcons' Michelle Alozie, 2 from the penalty spot, and a header from Gabriela Salgado gave them the victory over Nigeria. Europe's Golden Shoe winner Robert Lewandowski has sent out a warning to defences around Europe when he likened himself to a good wine that was still improving. The Bayern Munich striker also offered warm praise and thanks to his wife Anna when he received the award as top scorer in European football last season earlier today. And that's a wrap on sports news. I'm Ayotunde Balogun. Back to you, March, for the round.
Thanks a lot, Ayotunde. And the main news again. President Muhammadu Buhari, alongside over 100 world leaders today, attended the opening ceremony of the United Nations General Assembly in New York as U.S. President Joe Biden urged unity among nations. Also today, the President sought amendment to the Petroleum Industry Act and called for an adjustment in the provision for better geographic representation on the boards of the NNPC. Hundreds more people were today evacuated from La Palma, the Canary Islands, as lava erupted from an erupting volcano near the Atlantic Ocean. Thanks for watching the news at 10 tonight. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Good night.